Any questions on anything? Some people had questions about homework 3 and the idea, well, let me explain. The input is food. Initially, that's the prompt. 8 pounds, 9 ounces should be entered as a string, not two separate numbers, 8 and 9, okay? There is some string processing involved in this assignment. So you got to separate the 8 from the 9, okay, and convert to integers. This whole thing is a string. Then the second line is, okay, this is food input or something. Food at end of feeding the monkey, end somewhere, is say 6 pounds, 13 ounces. So that's also a string. And that's why you have the find command in sample 2. On code samples, this also one string. Then you got to output. This is the output. This is the input. I want input and output to be exactly as shown because that's what people do in industry. They tell you exactly what the processing has to be. Okay? You can't change it. You can't say, no, I'm going to input 2 numbers instead of 1 string. You cannot do that. So what's the difference between these two? 1 pound, 16 plus 9, 25, minus this, 12 ounces. If you want, you can put in pounds and ounces to make it clearer. Somewhere. I would put it here. Pounds and ounces. In fact, I would put it here and here as well. Right? Does that make sense? You should always indicate what unit it is. Is it time? Is it pounds? Is it kilograms? Is it Fahrenheit, centigrade, etc.? Otherwise, nobody knows what those numbers mean, right? Any other questions on that? Okay, let's pick up. This is an easy chapter, so I'm going to do this. Remind me to play a small video about 3 minutes long. I usually play it in all my classes. I forgot this section. It's very funny YouTube video. So if you wish to watch it, stay around. It'll take me 25 minutes or less to do this chapter. It's not on test 1. It will be on test 2. So please practice all the problems at the back of each chapter for test 1. Plus for test 2 and for the homework coming up, number 4, 5 and 6, you will need if statements, you'll need while loops, you may need for loops. So you can read the rest of the book for that. Okay? The book becomes harder and harder as you progress. After chapter 7, it becomes hard. Okay, so once again, the reminder, computer shortcut, Y drive, Spring. Oh, can someone dim the lights, please, so you can see the screens better? 120.
Here.
That one can be left on. That's the front row or something. The 4 switches on the right. Yeah. Go ahead. Thank you. And one more, I think.
That's good.
That's good. Okay. You get a better contrast, right? Okay. So once again, I'm not going to go through everything possible. For example, code samples. There are a lot of them. There are about Control A. How many files here? I'm not going to run them all. 46 little programs. Now I've run a few of them. For today's material, do you see if statement, if then else? Run that one if I don't get around to it. Hello was a very simple Python program. Handout 1 is handout 1, right? I gave you that. We've not done functions, but we've done formats. So I've put 2 formats. By the way, I need to do this one. Edit with Notepad is good enough. It's a very simple program. For x in range 1, 11 means x will be 1 first. I'm just telling you what will come in the future. Then it will do the rest of the for loop. Then it makes x equal to 2, does the rest of the loop. The last value x takes on is what? 10. Python is weird. It misses the last number for some reason. And this format means the following. according to this format, print x, according to this format, print x square, according to this format, print x cube. Okay? And they're all integers. That's why you see the D. Now the 2D means print in two decimal places. Two digits, sorry. No, there's no decimal place, it's integer. For floating point, there is a decimal place, right? This is printed in 3 places, this is printed in 4 places. Now the 0, 1, 2, which I finally figured out by looking on the internet, 0 refers to the first item x, 1 to the next item x square, and 2 to the last item. Don't ask me why they did it that way. Python is weird. Let's run it and see. It'll take only a few seconds. And then format also you need to run and understand. But I can't possibly remember which ones I have run and not run and so on. So you've got to run all of them eventually to understand the material. Okay, so which file do I open first? Format.Py. Oh, we are not on the Y drive. And sample 2 is the one with the find command. Sample 1 and sample 3 may have the find command too. I don't remember. I'll run the if statement in a few minutes, but format.2 first. Okay, so if you save the file with .py extension, you see this in orange, right? All the keywords are in orange. All the functions like print and range are in purple. All the strings are in green. That's a string. Can be in double quote or single quotes. Dot format, and then you got 3 things here because you got 3 things here. And I'll change one of these to a different number and see what happens in a minute. Invalid syntax. Oh, that's because this is the older version of Python. What do we need here? Parentheses. Okay. That was 2.7.2 or something. Okay, here. Does this look like a neatly printed table? That's why we are doing the formats, right? Now, if I change one of these numbers to a 2, that means I've got 2 different formats for this third thing. It may not work. It'll get confused maybe. But let's see what it does. That's not clean, right? It's printing the same number twice, the cube. Anyway, that's the effect of that. It's saying print the third item in the list because counting begins with 0, 0, 1, 2. So the third item in the list is this. So it's printing it twice. Okay, any questions on that? But again, if you have questions, ask me or Google the answer or go to python.org. So we need to open the other one, which is, see, it keeps jumping back to the wrong folder. Code samples. What did I say? I'll run format. Okay. Explain that briefly. See, for float numbers, you need a 0.2f, not d anymore. Let me compare the other with this. Oh, there are only 2. Anyway, this was d, right? D for decimal numbers. There's no decimal point there. So this will print a $sign. And the 0 refers to the 0th item, or the first item actually. And the 0.2f is the 2 decimal places. And this without the decimal place. So this is a useful program because it rounds up this if you have more than a 5 here, 5 or more here. You can try playing with that. Just don't save it on the Y drive, please. Okay, so this is the output. The original data is this. After formatting, it is this. And for the decimal number, you see a space before the 6, right? So it's in 2 places. So you can obviously change these numbers around and play with it a little bit for your assignments. You've got to use different formats, right? And one last thing which I was going to run was the if statement. No, there is idle. I need to close this and open that file. See, it keeps jumping back to some other folder. I don't know why. Should stay with y colon. If statement. This is what we are studying today. Before I run it, let me explain. Why is the int needed? Because everything input is normally a string, right? So you need to convert that number into a string. I mean string into a number and put it in num. Now suppose I enter 7. What will this give you? Num %2. 1. Is it equal to 0? No. So it will do the else part. Suppose I run the program again and enter 6. What does that give you? 0. Therefore, will it do the then part or the else part? This is called the then part. Even though you don't see a then, you see a colon here, right? But in Python, they don't use then. In other languages, they do use then in Java and other places. Unfortunately, I get confused between the dozen or so languages I used to know. I've forgotten half of them because they're obsolete. Let me just make a short list of languages which I used to deal with. The oldest one being Agarwal. I'm sure you've never heard of it. COBOL, Fortran. These are the ones I've forgotten a long time ago. Pascal. That is somewhat useful. PL1. These are the ones I forgot. Okay. The others which are still current are Python is my #1 favorite right now. This pen is no good. That is even worse. The red works. Newer languages, older languages. Let me add C and C++ to this. Even though C++ is still current, I don't use it much. Among the new ones, Python I like more. Java is still current, although it's getting old. It's 15 years old now. Python is about 10. And there are others I don't know, JavaScript, etc. Now, can you guess how many total languages there are, computer languages, roughly? Obsolete or non-obsolete ones? Roughly 1,000. 600 of those are old, obsolete, gone. So you have to keep up with change. I can't stay with Fortran from 40 years ago. I'll be like some of the other instructors I know. I won't go into detail. That's a bad thing to say. I didn't say LSUS. It could be somewhere else. Okay. Let's get down to the PowerPoint. And like I said, it'll take me about 20 minutes. And the whole reason for putting all this free of charge on this is so you can copy it. No, software, there's nothing there. PowerPoint. So you can copy all this, look at it over and over again, and take these code samples home and run them and learn from them. Assignments are always there. Homework 3 is the current one. I don't remember when it's due. Course information has the test announcement. Okay? So if you lose any piece of paper, you can always go to this. And the same thing is on Moodle. So you got plenty of duplication, which is important. Sometimes you can't get to the Y drive from home, etc. But you can get to Moodle. Out of all this, the most useful folders are the assignment, course information, code samples, and PowerPoint. So let's get to the PowerPoint. I use the older version of 2010 version because it's cleaner. And open, here's open. My eyesight's not getting any better. I think I shouldn't have gone in for the eye surgery. But it's too late now. They can't undo it. Because there's only a 10% improvement. And the doctors are anxious for their payment, right? So don't go in for cataract surgery till you really need it. I was told later by another eye doctor, there's a way to measure the brightness of the light going in through the cataract. They never conducted a test like that. So the improvement is only 10-20%. I wish it was more. Anyway, chapter 6. So I'm doing one chapter a week approximately. And on test 2, it'll be chapters 2 through 9. I'm going to repeat some of the material. Of course, you can't do without assignment statements. But the emphasis will be on 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, for test 2. Test 1 is on 1 through 5, 9 days from today, I believe. 10, 11, and 12 are the harder chapters. I think 12 is the hardest. I don't remember which is the hardest. Functions are pretty easy. I think that's 10. Arrays are not too difficult, but files are a little more complex. Okay? So let me finish 6 today. This is a summary, so I'll skip that. This is the general syntax of an if statement. And this pseudocode. This is not Python because we don't see a colon here and we see an end if. Now why did we put end if in pseudocode? Because it's clearer, right? Python should have they should have used an end if. They did not. They should have used a then. They did not. So languages have their own defects. So this Boolean expression means, we just learned that a week ago, right? Has to turn out to be true or false because there are only two choices, right? Should not be a numeric expression. If it turns out to be true, you do a true choice. Can there be many statements here between these two? Answer is yes. The else in Python would require a colon after this. And false choice again can have any number of statements, not just one. It could also be empty. It could be 0 statements. And in Python, they use indentation. They indent everything under the else to the right, everything under the then to the right. So that's why they can do without the end if. So if you're not careful with the indentation, you end up in trouble. So try out some of those later. Let's move on. So this is a very simple example. If A is given the value 4, you do the right to left assignment, right? 3 stored in B. Will this be true or false? At this time it's true, right? 4 is greater than 3. So it's going to print variable A is greater than variable B. If it was false, if I reverse these, exchange these values, do you think it will print this one? Yes. Now is this pseudocode? Is it Python? Clearly it's pseudocode because there's a then here, this if is capitalized, else is capitalized. There is no capital letter for keywords in Python. This will be all lower. We're coming to Python in a minute. So since this is true, it'll print this statement, right? Any questions on this extremely simple example? No? Okay. Now if you reverse the values, A is no longer greater than B. Therefore it's going to do the then part, else part, I'm sorry. Any questions on that? Okay, we're about 1/3 done with the, so that's the answer. We've added this diamond box for selection structures. These are called selection structures. That's the name of the chapter. And you've got to have a Boolean expression in here. Should turn out to be either true or false, nothing else. I can't put in A times 3, for example. That doesn't make sense, right? That's neither true nor false. And some languages allow that. C++, C, they allow arithmetic expressions with a totally different meaning. So I won't get into that, and we are not studying that language anyway. So this for input, output, this for assignment, this for start and stop. And these are to connect the boxes. Any questions on that? So this is the general syntax of a flowchart with an if statement or a Boolean expression. A box like this, true, false, false choice. Again, that can be any number of statements, including another if statement, or a loop, or assignment statement. So this idea is sort of recursive. You can use any box inside any other. Okay. By the way, the other thing which I'm not getting to is handout 2 and handout 3. Those examples of structured flowcharts. You ought to take a quick look at those sometimes, or remind me to do them in class if you get confused, or ask me questions. There is some reading that you have to do on your own, because I'm getting more forgetful nowadays. So sometimes I cover some material, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I cover the same chapter twice. I'm just kidding, that doesn't happen. Someone in class usually tells me I've done it before, right? Okay, so is this a familiar type of flowchart? Yes. If the light is green, you drive through. If it's not, you have to wait and then drive through. Now you can't exchange the true with the false. You'll end up in an accident, right? So this very ordinary day-to-day activity. By the way, I failed to point out that sequencing is important too. You wear socks and then the shoes, not the other way around, right? And so tests like this are also very obvious, and loops are also obvious if you think about them. So this is the flowchart for one of those problems where you had 4 assigned to A, 3 to B. These are bad names for variables. I noticed some of you have been using real short names, A1, A2, A3, which are meaningless. You should use start hours, start end hours, stuff like that. Use the camel notation, cost of water, etc. So this a very simple example, so we let it go with A and B. If this is true, you print this out, which is correct, isn't it? Variable A is in fact greater than variable B. If not, why do we have greater than or equal to variable B? Because if both were given the value 3 or both were given the value 4, and you did the false part, you don't want to mislead the person saying that B is greater than A, right? That would be false perhaps. But do you have any questions on this simple example? Okay, we are coming to the Python. This is the pseudocode. Please input a number, get num. Now pseudocode doesn't need any conversions. We don't have to worry about whether it's a string or a number or whatever. It is a number, of course. We said please input a number, so it must be a number. This I don't like because it's a Python symbol, right? In pseudocode I would write if num is divisible by 2 or equals 0. I mean something equivalent, more English-like. Then print even number. And again this pseudocode, don't need parentheses. Get num is clear enough. Else is good. But indentation helps reading this and writing also. If I did not do indentation, it becomes confusing real fast. Okay? That's the only reason for good indentation. Any questions on this? Why is the start stop necessary? Because it could be a continuation on a second page or something, so it's good to put start at the top and indent the whole thing over a little bit, couple of spaces. But this will not run in Python because E should be not capital, there should be a colon here, there should be no then, etc. Syntax errors, lots of them. So this is the flowchart, and once again I would replace this by saying if num is divisible by 2. Does that turn out to be true or false? Yes. Boolean expression. Now if you want, you can write 1 equal, 2 equals. Again, this is just a flowchart, it doesn't matter. And I forgot the print statement here to prompt the user for a number. But if you find a bug, let me know. Yes?
In the book, it states that you don't have to put print statements in the flowchart because it's implied by the get number that there has to be some sort of interaction.
Okay, the reason we put the get and the print is we use the same shape box.
No, I'm talking about a print up top there. Where you would print an instruction that says please input a number or something.
Oh yeah, okay. Well,
now my question is,
I haven't read the book. I mean, I've written the book 5 years ago, but then I have not kept up with it.
Well,
yes.
and I understand. I'm just looking for clarification.
Go ahead, go ahead.
My take on documentation is you're trying to be explicit with what this thing does.
Yes,
not just willy-nilly, oh, he'll figure it out.
No. See, why did I put it here?
No, and I understand that. I'm talking about a flowchart.
Therefore, it's good to be consistent, right?
Okay.
I should have put it because of consistency only, nothing. We are not running the pseudocode, we are not running the flowchart. We will run the visual logic, we will run the Python, but not these. But to be consistent, it's a good idea to put the print here.
Okay.
Okay?
Very good.
And then if you want to argue a little bit more, why don't we use the other rhombus shaped thing for output, like Visual Logic does? That's because Visual Logic came much later than flowcharts. These flowcharts are about 60 or so years old. Okay? Structured flowcharts are about 40 years old. I like the structured flowcharts better myself, and be ready to see them on the tests. Even though I don't cover them a whole lot, I've given you 3 handouts. What good are they if you don't read them, right?
Where are these handouts on the Y drive?
Day 1, no, they're not scanned in or anything. They're printed and given to you on day 1. If you've lost it, I've got some extra ones here. It says handout 1, handout 2, handout 3. 3 pages stapled together on day 1. I gave you 6 handouts. One of them was the homework assignment, one was the syllabus, one was the important dates. That's 3.
Okay, very good.
And 1 page was the problems. And I forget what the other 2 were. Syllabus, yeah, syllabus. And the last one I don't remember. Anyway, to be consistent, and nowadays you force the true and false parts to meet at this single point here. That is good programming practice. In the good old days, 60 years ago, they didn't think about it. Flowcharts became very complex just because of that. So remember, these are joined. And I'll make an exception. I'll do a tiny little flowchart, structured flowchart for this. It's very simple. It's more like pseudocode and this combined. See, a structured flowchart, I'll just write str flowchart. Actually is also called an NS chart, also called a Chapin chart. He's not the singer. He was a computer scientist. NS stands for 2 of my friends actually. They're 1 year ahead of me at Stony Brook, Nasi and Schneiderman. This is spelled without the C actually. So they came up with this simultaneously in 1972. Wrote a paper or 2. So structured flowchart has to have a start and a stop, just like the pseudocode. And it's a good idea to number these boxes so you can trace through. I'll do that, in fact. It's a good place to start. So this will be number 1, right? And number 2 will be the print, enter a number. Number 3 will be the get or read or whatever you call it. Read the number. Number 4 will be comparison with 0. I mean, is number divisible by 2? That's good enough, isn't it, in English? You don't need to know about the percent sign, that's Python specific. This doesn't have even algebra in it. It says in plain English, can number be divided by 2? If yes or no, these are the 2 halves. This box 5, this box 6. Here you would print even, and here you would print odd. I'm making a summary of that statement, otherwise I would print the number entered is an even number, number entered is an odd number. Okay. So finally, the reason for this is slightly better than regular flowcharts, which are called standard flowcharts. So if on a test I say make a standard flowchart, you make the one on the screen, okay, with the arrows. Now, structured flowchart these are 60-year-old, these are 40-year-old. And these are superior because the flow of the logic is clearer. Standard are confusing sometimes. So this is a trace. Trace means which steps do you go through? Sometimes you go through 5, sometimes 6, right? This is box 6. It all depends. And trace means you write down a small chart like this. There are plenty of examples in the book. after which step? After step 1, what's the value of number? And what's the output? This separate. Okay, after step 1, number is undefined because we've not entered any. After step 2, we have this on the printout, enter number. My writing is becoming worse as I become older and older, right? When you read the number, then only it has a value. So at step 3, suppose I have put in 7 for the number. Is 7 divisible by 2? That's box 4. So box 4 I can write over here, is number divisible by 2? The same exact thing as in this box here. The answer is what? No. Or false. I can write false instead of this and write true instead of y, right? Same thing. So in this case, which one are we going to do? Box 6, right? So the next step is box 6, and we are going to print out odd, right? And then stop. Box 7 is stop. So that's called a trace, giving all the details of all the variables in the program and also the conditions. Any questions on that? Now there are so many examples in the book, it would be pretty boring if I stood up here and repeated some of that material, right? Which I'm doing right now. Okay, go ahead.
And in the if-else statement, could you like do in the else part another if?
Of course, we're coming to that.
Okay.
In the next chapter, it's called nested if statement. So if you have two conditions, if num is divisible by 2, can you not say if num is divisible by 3, then do something, etc., etc.? Yes, you can. In fact, the only thing we've not covered so far in structured flowcharts or Python or whatever are loops. So very quickly, this is a summary of the rest of the book. Chapter 6 is if statements, simple if statements. Chapter 7 is nested. They're called nested because they look like a nest. I won't go into that explanation. But the next chapter is loops. And there are two types, while loops and for loops. Chapter 9 is nested loops. And I won't bother with the rest of the chapters, but in summary, one of them is functions, the other one is arrays, and the last one is files. And they become more and more difficult after functions. Okay? Any other questions? But of course, I give you assignments on some of them, so you learn. I don't have an assignment for functions though, but we'll pick up with any other questions, okay? So this is a comment. It's good to write at least 3 lines of comments at the top of the program you write. First, your name, date, and the purpose of the program. At least 3 lines of comment. So I've skipped the first 2 lines. This program inputs a number and prints if it is odd or even. Does that summarize the program? Yes. I'll run one more program today to show you how complex it can get. So I don't need to explain this, but if you did, you would write a hash sign here and write a brief comment explaining what this statement does, if it's a complex statement. But this is simple enough. So again, this Python. So if num%2 equals 0, you got to put 2 equals, right? Without a space in between, like it sort of seems there is one. And a colon here, not then. And this should be lowercase if. Then this is indented couple of places, same as this. It has to be matching indentation. Else colon, do this. That's it, that's the whole program. It doesn't have a start, doesn't have a stop explicitly, but it always starts at top, right? Ends at the bottom. And it does exactly what you saw in the flowchart of the pseudocode or the structured flowchart, right? And this is a complete program. You can, of course, cut and paste it into idle and run it. Okay? And that's what the first if-then-else program under code samples does. Oh, by the way, you got to be very careful about syntax. If there are two parentheses here, you got to have two here. If there's a double quote here, a single quote won't do. You got to use a double quote here, etc. You can't write div or mod or anything here if it's a %, right? So Python is more rigid in structure than pseudocode or flowcharts, okay, as you found out. So these are two runs. You could run it 5 or 6 more times. It doesn't prove anything because the program is correct, right? We know it's correct. But you should test it at least 2 times if it has an if statement. If it has 2 if statements, one inside the other, you got to test it at least 3 times. One inside the other, nested. If it's one after the other, 4 times, etc. So there are theories about all that, and they come later, much later. Like our courses 480, 481 have some of that, code verification and stuff like that. So any questions on this? Okay, now once again, if you forget the int, that's a meaningless program because that's a string, right? You can't divide a string with 2 and see what happens and all that. Now some of you missed the int and were asking me, I'm not criticizing anybody, it's a common mistake everybody makes in the beginning. What does this program do? It runs fine. I say n equals input and if, no, somebody had print n star 4, that's it, nothing else. They forgot the int over here. It still runs, but what does it do? Suppose I put in 1.5 as the input. What will be the output? I'm not going to ask you on that on the test or anything because it's tricky.
So you're saying don't write it that way?
Put the int in there. If you forget the int, it will not convert to number. It will be a string. So suppose I put in, without that, I put in 1.5 as the input. The output is 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. Can anyone explain it? Because it's doing 3 concatenations on the string 1.5. That's valid in Python, but it's meaningless for what we want to do, right? So people are getting confused. Why am I getting this? I said that's because you got to convert to an integer. Any questions on that? So in this course, we are dealing mostly with integers and floating point numbers, occasionally with strings. I will not give you too many string processing assignments. It's confusing. Homework 3 is the hardest one for string processing. Okay, we are almost done. So that's the output. You've got to test it, otherwise it may not print even number, odd number. Just do the following and try it out. Where's the previous slide? Here. Just try running it without the int and see what happens. Okay, you'll get an error somewhere here. Okay, next problem. If you input the rate of pay in dollars per hour and the number of hours employed, this is the type of thing that you need an if statement for. You're trying to give the employee overtime pay. If they put in more than 40 hours, you got to pay. That's the law, right? In California, they're trying to make the minimum wage $15.25 or something. Okay, so this is a pseudocode. Get the rate, get the hours. I'm skipping a few details. If hours exceeds 40, you got to pay them overtime. So this is the correct expression for that. For the first 40 hours, that's the pay. Add to that for the extra hours 1.5 times. If you make a mistake, then the employee is getting too much or too little money. Okay? Otherwise, if they work 30 hours or 40, then that's the pay. Test this out. This is a pseudocode. So you can put plus here, comma here, makes no difference. If you use plus and you want Python, then you've got to put str here. If you put a comma, it will do the conversion. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay. So this is the flowchart, and once again, the prompt would be nice for compatibility. between the pseudocode and this. I don't think we can make it much easier than this for the first example. And that's the program. So you got to run this and make sure it works. And this is the run 1, run 2, like I usually have, at least 2 runs. And for 6 hours, I'm sorry, 30 hours at $6 an hour should be 180. It doesn't even print 2 zeros here because we've not formatted it, right? You should use a format and all that here if you want 2 decimal places or convert to cents and this and that. Now if you put in 50 hours, for 10 hours you should get $9 an hour. So it should work out to $330. Try it out. We can't do everything, so you got to check it out later. Okay? Run the program. It's all on the C. If it's not on the Y drive, you can cut and paste from here and run it. So I don't know what this empty bullet is in here. You got a few mistakes here and there. I'm going to skip all that, and that's the end of the lecture. But I still